Jet Force Gemini was a third-person space shooting game. No one had ever really done a third-person targeting system, and we kind of did a lot of groundwork on that.
We kind of introduced as well quite early on though an adventure element, so it was kind of, if you think of things like Mario 64 and Tomb Raider at the time, that kind of thing, we wanted it to feel like it was this big world still that you could explore in, and you didn't just have to go around shooting everything. So we did a lot of work trying to get the balance right between being able to adventure and being able to feel like you had enough accuracy and enough enjoyment in the shooting to make it feel like a proper fully fledged shooter.
I remember Paul Mountain and Martin Wakely huddled over the keyboard. Paul was stripping back all the code that he didn't need from Diddy Kong Racing, and then working with Martin to come up with a nice, tight third-person shooter control scheme.
It was also, we wanted it to be challenging, not just to be kind of a very lightweight game. So you had the kind of standard thing where you could play through the game and you'd maybe get to like 40–50% completion and get a kind of reward, if you like, for getting to that point in the game. But there was also all these kind of side challenges, and one of them, probably the most famous one in terms of people who played it, is the one for collecting all the tribals, because that could be quite tricky if you were a bit kind of trigger happy, because you could lose a few in the crossfire. So, it was a lot of fun to make. Everybody who was on there was kind of mad about space games and space films, for that matter. We'd all kind of grown up on this stuff in the 70s, 80s and early 90s.
Martin would kind of spec out the designs for how the level should work, but really in terms of the visuals and even down to a lot of the finer details, we had so much fun. I remember early in the project making a trip into Birmingham to go to the big comic shops there, just looking for sci-fi comics and toy catalogues that were full of kind of spaceship toys and robot toys.
Visually, we were very influenced by a 1980s cartoon called Battle of the Planets. And the original character models all look like that. We eventually changed the character models, but the original look was very much based on that cartoon series.
The team lead was Martin Wakely, and I went to him to talk about the music, and he said, well, we're basing the game on old school arcade games, and there isn't any music in old school arcade games, so I was a bit stuck to know where to go with. And luckily, Robin Beanland took over and did a very, very good job on music.
It was a pretty tight timeline to get the score done for Jet Force. So Martin was kind of just basically, whatever you want to do with it, it's, you know, it's up to you. And I decided to sort of go more the sort of John Williams sci-fi orchestral type thing. Get as close to an orchestra as I could do with a small amount of memory and a cartridge. Really, really pleased with that. Really pleased with the theme tune, which is actually an old Conker tune. We had a stadium in 12 Tales and I used that tune and sort of filled it out and, you know, made more of it.
So there were some quite off-the-wall things in Jet Force. We had the kind of main game, the kind of cohesive space game, but then we had a bit of fun as well while we were making it. So there were lots of little things that kind of made it into there. One of them was the fish food.
So the fish food in Jet Force was probably one of the most controversial features, bizarrely. The fish food was there to feed fish, and that's all it did, and that seemed to infuriate some people who felt it should have a higher purpose.
So what does the fish food do? And the answer would be, you use it to feed fish. Then the question would come back, what can you actually do with it? What could you use the fish food for in the game? And the answer was, you feed fish with it. And this was just a recurring theme about what the actual fish food, what purpose the fish food served in the game.
So there was a lot of hidden stuff in Jet Force Gemini. I put a lot of content in that game. There was 2 different race games featured in the game. One of them was a top-down arcade racer, heavily influenced by Super Sprint, but that was called Jeff and Barry Racing, which was in the arcade, which was in the nightclub, I believe. And there was also an Into the Screen racing game, which had a lot of time put into it. And also we featured, I think we were the first Rare game to feature Mr. Pants.
You could turn all the ants into Mr. Pants and they all kind of hobbled awkwardly around the background as you shot them. So that was quite fun as well.
But we ran into some problems with the age rate. because we realised then you could obviously decapitate a man dressed in underwear, which wasn't what we expected to do when we started making the game. So I think a few compromises had to be made on that, and setting Mr. Pants on fire was ditched from the game as well.
I do remember on the end of Jet Force we were desperate to get a lot of stuff in there, so we kept kind of trying to get these features working, and as a result we probably ended up spending some weeks towards the end where we were doing maybe like 80, 90 hours. I remember driving home some mornings at like 5 o'clock in the morning, going to bed for a few hours and then coming back in about 9. But it was just, you just loved doing it because it was something that you really wanted to get working, and you wanted it to look the way and sound the way and feel the way that you wanted. So you're kind of driven along by this kind of passion for making it work and getting the game just how you wanted it to be.
One thing we were particularly proud of was the co-op, the drop-in, drop-out co-op. Someone could come in, plug a joystick in, and then join in, and then play as Floyd the robot and leave when they felt like it. As far as I'm aware, there was nothing like that at the time.
I think on the team we were really generally quite satisfied with the critical reviews we got. We got lots of 8s out of 10s, 9s out of 10s, and always lots of compliments for the art as well, which was particularly pleasing from our point of view. I think the creative energy of everyone on that team really shines through in the product. We loved working on it because we had so much creative input ourselves.
Not by any means do I think it's a faultless game, but I hope that it was a fun game that people could enjoy, and it was a bit more kind of, I don't know, off the wall, I suppose, compared to a lot of games.
It's still a real gem of a game, and definitely worth checking out.